Okay, are we ready to go?
I think we're ready, John. Thank you
Good.
so. What a wonderful program, interesting program, and we're so looking forward to hearing about your experience searching your genealogy.
Okay. Well, let's start off with how I got started in genealogy. It wasn't a difficult thing. It was pretty simple. I have an aunt who is my dad's sister, and I have a great uncle who was my grandmother's brother, both who had created written charts with dates of birth on each side of the family. So that was my starting point because I had the information I needed to get started. And my family basically goes back in the United States to the early 1900s, the latter part of the infusion of people from the Ukraine and Russia and other places during that period of time, which started in the late 1800s up into the 1900s. All my relatives that I have information on are basically relatives that I know. I haven't gone into Europe and looked at anything. So everything I have is in the United States since around 1902, 1903. After I got the charts, of course, I had these two pieces of yellow pieces of paper with this information, right? So the next question is, what do I do with this information? I had no clue. And I learned about a program that was available called Family Tree. It was basically a computer disk which you put on your computer, and you were able to create a family tree from that computer disk. Well, I had all the information to put into it, and so that was my initial thing, was to get all that information into one place. Some of my early efforts had to do with the Los Angeles County Hall of Records and also with the Mormon genealogy programs. I had familiarity with LA County, and quite frankly, all of my relatives were in Los Angeles. All of my grandparents, my great-grandparents, were in Los Angeles prior to 1910 or around 1910. So both my parents grew up in Los Angeles, were born in Los Angeles. A lot of my aunts, uncles, and cousins were all born in Los Angeles. So that really made it easy for me. I didn't have to go around and search the rest of the world. It's a little easier than somebody that maybe was born or grew up in Chicago or New York, where you'd have to get into records back there. Although what I'll show you is today, all that information is available on the computer. It's all electronic, and it's a wonderful system. When I started working with the Mormon genealogy, there's the Mormon temple in Los Angeles. I visited there and did some genealogy search, and as well as the one in Salt Lake. I visited there a couple of times in Salt Lake. Those days, it was interesting because the only way you could find information was on what they called these machines where they had photographic images, and you had to find where those photographic images were for the information you wanted. So it was quite a challenge to get into that information. Actually, it was easier to work with LA County and go down and get that information. So some of the early records that I have are from LA County. From there, I graduated into Ancestry. So once again, I had all of the information that I had, which I had records scanned into my computer on this family tree maker. And so all of those records that I had there, I was able to upload eventually into Ancestry.com. And Ancestry.com has grown and developed over the years. With the electronics and the research that's been done in genealogy, it's amazing what floats in and out on electronics. Almost anything you want. Censuses up to the latest census are all available. Records that if you wanted to know where your grandfather or grandmother lived in a certain period of time, that's all available because you have both census records, and you have also the phone books from all over the United States. I'll give you an example. I knew that my mother lived for a short period of time in Long Beach with my grandparents, and I had no idea where they lived. I was able to find out the exact address, which was 333 Pine Avenue, through one of the phone records. So there's a lot of things that you can learn if you're interested in that kind of thing. Additionally, I have experienced some other sites. So there are other sites besides Ancestry now out there. There's several of them. I played around with a couple of them just to see what the differences were and how they worked. Let me move my notes down here a little bit so I can, okay. One of the other things about Ancestry, I think it's both fascinating and interesting, is that if you do DNA testing, it does one thing. It proves who you are, where you're from. I did my DNA. My daughter and my son have both done their DNA. A few other people I know have done DNA. And what the DNA tells you is where you are from. So I know that I'm 100% European Jewish. My grandparents are from Ukraine, Poland, and Romania, and therefore I know there's no other factors in my DNA. It's all 100% Jewish, and it's 100% Jewish European. Your DNA also can take you back even further than that. So I'll go into that later when I show you some ideas on DNA. One of the things that one of the other things in DNA that I think is fascinating is there's, when you do your DNA, and if you do it with Ancestry, let's say, you end up allowing that to be out in the world. So example of other people who are doing their DNA, you come up with matches. Now matches on DNA are at various levels. So a brother and sister, you're gonna have a high match. You get into third, fourth, fifth cousins, you got lower matches. It has to do with the percentage in DNA, and it's a long thing to try to explain, and I'm not sure I fully understand it. But I have somewhere around a couple of thousand people match DNA on my DNA profile. One of the things that came up on my DNA profile is a cousin who is the grandson of my grandmother's sister. I would have never met him, although some of my other cousins had met him, if it hadn't been. And so we have chart sharing. In fact, he's on my Facebook today. So I've learned about him, he's learned about me, and it's been a very enjoyable relationship. And for me, it was a new find. Wouldn't have found it through the DNA. The other thing about DNA, it's hard to match profiles if you, let's say on my chart, I have a series of names. Well, I know everybody on my profile, so I know all the names, I know what they are historically. So if I look at somebody else's profile and I go, well, there's nobody matching my names, how could these people and I be related? Well, you're so far down on the chart, it's very hard sometimes to find that relationship. So a lot of the DNA matches I don't particularly pay attention to because they're just too far removed from where my interest level is. I've got a few cousins that have also done DNA, so they're also on my DNA profile. We've shared charts back and forth. One of my cousins, who's the granddaughter of my great aunt, has her chart, so we've shared information. I have some other cousins that we've shared information. So that's one way to do it. And if they've done DNA, they're all on my DNA profile. If you go back in history, one of the things I found interesting amongst most of my relatives is offering help or doing comparable charts. So although lately I've noticed some of the younger generation hasn't done anything yet, I'm hoping some of them will. Another thing that I found, and I'm going to go through it a little later, is that on Facebook, there's several groups on Facebook who are doing genealogy research. Example would be Poland, Ukraine, Moldavia, and Ukraine. You know, these various groups are helpful in that if you need something translated in a language, there's always somebody you can find on those groups that can help do that. You may be able to do some shared research or matching. I haven't done much of that, but they're also available, and I will get more into that later. In the world of genealogy, there's just able to get a lot of information because of electronics today. When a connection is made, there's a notice that comes up on your genealogy chart. I'll show you that when I get into Ancestry and show you how that works. Basically, what I enjoy learning and having information on, it's going to be passed down to future generations. My grandkids who don't have a lot of contact with the family the way I did, because most of the people, my aunts, uncles, and my great aunts and uncles are no longer here. So this will be available to them. My daughter knows a lot of these people, and I have also taken my chart. My daughter's done her DNA. She has an Ancestry site, and so I've put the charts on her Ancestry site so that she'll have it later on. Okay, I'm going to go into something a little bit different. Get it up here. Okay. This is an application for a birth record. So in the old days, what you had to do is you had to go to the county, and at the county, you had to find, fill out a form to find a record. And this is, of course, one I was searching for on my father and my grandfather, and my grandmother. And this is the old way of doing it. You'd have to pay them a visit. You'd have to go into the microfiche to find the information. And so it was timely and wasn't exactly the easiest way to do it, but I've done a lot of that in the old days. I'm happy to do it the modern way because the information, instead of me looking for it, generally finds me. Now, if you're thinking about doing genealogy, if you've done it before, you may know some of this stuff. If you haven't done it, remember I said that the first way I started was my aunt and uncle had written down all the information. So I had 2 sheets of paper with the information on it. You can get an Ancestry tree either online, you can go to the stationery store and get them, or you can use just a yellow pad and write the information down. This is one way that you can do it because this is the Beyer family tree. That's a great-great-grandfather. That's my grandfather. This is my father. And so you can see that I took this off of Ancestry, but this is how my Ancestry tree follows. And what you would do is you'd use something like this to get the information. If you're interested, I can help you out with that. Okay. I'm going to get something else up here so I can go through that with you. If you want to do DNA testing, once again, Ancestry.com, which is genealogy, family trees, and records. You can also go to Family Tree Search, which is another site. DNA testing is another one. MyHeritage.com is another site. So you have these various sites where you can do DNA testing, and you can also create a family tree, 23andMe. I've done testing with 23andMe, and I've done testing with my heritage, just to see if they came up with anything different. And to tell you the truth, everything seems to be the same. So I don't see anything really different. Get the next one up here. Okay, so now we're into family tree. I mean, this is Ancestry.com, okay? So we go into Ancestry.com. All my information that I have is in Ancestry.com. And let's just talk about, before I get into the actual family tree, let's just talk about DNA, because I think if you're going to do a family tree, you really would behoove you to do a DNA just to see where your DNA is. You may know, like I did, historically where everybody was from, but the DNA proves it. So when you talk about DNA, this here is, okay. So when you look at my DNA, you see it's 100% European Jewish, okay? And the nice thing about this, it tells you the area in the world that DNA comes from, which if you look here, Ukraine, Romania, and Poland, those are where all my grandparents are from. So it's quite natural that I would have DNA that would come from those areas. You can get history and you can get a lot of information on DNA about Jews in Western Europe. If you're interested in that, it's just fascinating how it works out. It's gotten better and better as time goes along, because they're improving what they can do with DNA research, and it's nice to have. You get into your family tree. This is just an overview of some of the people, but this has recent family tree activity. So, and you'll see that I have 241 people on my ancestry. I have 459 pictures that I put up. I can view people with hints, and I'll show you what a hint is. I'm the home person, and it was last viewed by me. Also, if you want to learn about DNA testing, it's in here. It tells you about products, services. If you want to hire an expert, it's not something I've been interested in, but you can hire people, and it's particularly helpful if you want to go back into Europe and those areas to find out information. So you can do that too. You can travel to your homeland, ancestral homeland. If I would have done this when I was younger, I probably would have been better off, but most of my travel has not been in Europe. It's been outside of it, so I haven't done some of that, although I've been to Europe a little bit. And nice thing about it, you not only can do it on your computer, but you can do it on your phone. So I've got it both on my phone. You can order books and photos, visit Ancestry Academy so you can learn more about ancestry and how to research and do things. Now, one of the fun things that I like, you see up here, you see this 2 and this 8. If you see the 2 and 8, 8 is email. So if people are interested in my family tree or information, or I'm interested in theirs, you can email back and forth. So you can learn about people and that type of thing. This leaf here, that means I have 2 hints right now that are available in my family tree. One is a great-great-grandmother, and the other is Mark Stephen Richards. Mark is a cousin who passed away a few years ago. And so when you see these hints, that means because there's a record someplace, okay? So in the case of Mark, if I click on that, that'll take me to his place on family tree. And he's here because his brother set up a family tree, and I have him on his brother on my DNA. And so if you'll see here, you see the name Mark Stephen Richards, I knew him as Mark Richards. I didn't know his middle name was Stephen, but I do now. This has got his date of birth, his death date, and if you look down here, you can review the hint. So what is the hint? My guess is this probably his death record, but I'm not sure. Let's see. Okay. So, well, it came off of my daughter's site. That's interesting. And so it has Mark Stephen Richards, birth date and death date, his father, Don Richards, Jacqueline Louise. And I want to stop here for just 1 second. Okay, Mark and Danny, which is his brother, are cousins. Their mother is my mother's first cousin. So they're in my generation because my mother and their mother are in the same generation. Their father left their mother a couple of years before she passed away. She had breast cancer and passed away. And they were both raised by, after that, by my other cousin, who I happen to have a lot of history with. And the interesting thing here is that Danny, who started this family tree, found out more about his father in Ancestry than he knew previously. He found out his father had remarried. He found out they had some half sisters. And so he learned a lot because of Ancestry, and he's actually met some of these people. So I wanted to share that with you because Ancestry can help bring people together. Mark's not so much, but Danny had this longing to know more about his father and what that side of the family was like. So he was able to get a lot of that information and to satisfy it. Okay, so now let's go back. Okay, so that is a nice feature of Ancestry because once again, people who have people like you on their family tree and you have on your family tree, you can share information. Public records, you're going to get one of these leaves. So if a new public record comes up, you'll be able to check that out. I caution people because here's an interesting thing about names. I never thought there was another John Allen Byer. I can tell you, I have seen hundreds of John Allen Byers out there. So when you get into this family tree, one of the things that you want to be aware of is names and similar names or names that are actually the same. So if you are looking at records or you're looking at information, it helps to know a little bit because you can check and see that this person is not somebody you know because their history is totally different than your history. And so I've been able to get rid of a lot of that misinformation because I know enough to know what's real and what isn't real. But it helps, the more you know about your family, you won't get confused and put somebody in your family tree that doesn't belong in your family tree. Okay, so now we want to go to family trees. So you can see I have the Byer family tree and I also have my wife's. Now just a very short on this, my wife has 10,000 people on her family tree. She did research and she paid people to do research and she did it for over 20 years. Some of her kids questioned some of the people on the tree, whether they're accurate or not, but she's got, like I say, 10,000 people on her tree. She's got a lot of information. The only one that I have on my family tree are her children, even though they're not my children, and then also her. So I get some crossover information there. Let's go into my family tree. Okay. So like I said, there's 240 some people. Some people I have pictures of, some I don't. As you can see, this is me here. I've also got my father and my mother, and I've got their pictures. I've got several people on here. There's my brother and his wife. I've got their children on here. I've got some of my cousins and other people. And here's the nice thing I like about Family Tree. If you want a great place to document and save things, I think it's a great place. Now, some people may not feel that way, but I do. I have a couple cousins who are so secretive they wouldn't share information with anybody. But that's their choice, and that's the way they do it. Okay, so this is me, born in, says about 1940. That's an error. Oh, hold on, let me get rid of this one. Yeah, okay, so anyway, let's go into my profile, because I was actually born in 42 and my birth certificate's in here someplace. So it says birth about 1940, and I'm going to have to actually probably change that to 42. Death is living, so I'm still here, still alive. If you want to view in your family tree, me or anybody else, so if you bring somebody up and then you want to view them in their family tree, you go here. And what happens when you do that is that you will view it back in the family tree. Okay, so as you see is here I am, here's the family tree. People I have pictures on, I've put up so that the pictures are there. Okay. Also, you can view notes. So if you make notes, one of the nice things, and it's not something I've done a lot of, if you can sit down with people and talk about their history and what kind of work they've done, their families and all that stuff. If you want to put notes in here about that, you can do that, which is a nice feature. You can also view comments. You can merge with duplicates, and you can print out any of this information in member contact. Now, below that, you have what's called life story. So if you take a look at life story, okay. So that says when John Byer was born, right? And this says edit, okay? So John Byer was born about 1940, okay? His father, Robert, was 21 and his mother was 20. So they were young kids when they got married. I was married 5 times, had 1 son, 1 daughter, and have 1 brother and 1 sister who's deceased, okay? So when you look at the timeline, based on information that's in here, okay, I have David Byer as my son, Robert Byer as my father, Florine Byer, her maiden name is Silver. Then I have a list of my wives, starting with the first one going forward, and Ginny being the last one. I'm not bashful, so I don't mind explaining that to people. I've had an interesting life. This shows you some of the places I've lived, were based on some of the records. And once again, let's see. Okay, so date of birth, which would be okay. So January 6, 1942. So you can go in and correct these records. And now that'll correct the record. It tells you where I was born. I was born at St. Vincent Hospital. And I did have an opportunity to go back to St. Vincent's for a kidney stone removal. So I've been there actually twice, once when I was born and once many years later when I had a kidney stone removed. I just thought that was interesting because I'd never been there before, after I was born, except for that. This automatically, you will generate a story, replace the current information. So you just click save and you save the information. It's real easy to do. And then you close the window. So now you know that I was born on January 6, 1942. This is another interesting thing I learned from genealogy. My mother's name is Florine. That's how I've known her my whole life. If you see this, it says Elovina. That's on her birth certificate. I know nothing about it. When I discovered that, I didn't have anybody to really ask. And so I don't really know where that came from, but that is her actual name on her birth certificate. And that's my parents' information. You can save all kinds of pictures. You can see I've saved pictures. I've got a lot of them. They get in there by date. That's actually my granddaughter's brownie troop. This shows you I lived in Long Beach in 1935. That's not me. That's actually when my mother lived in Long Beach. I'm not sure how that got in there that way, but that's what it says. That's me as a baby. So it's one of the pictures I have, 1942. There's me in my mother's stomach. So I have that picture. Just nice place to save things. There's my dad, my mother, and me. And this house was probably on Orange Avenue in Los Angeles. But when you get down here later, I'll show you. I've got the 3 houses I grew up in. My sister was born 2 years later in 1944. There's a picture of my dad and my mother and me and my sister. I had a matching Navy outfit with my dad. He went in the service in 1945. There's some more pictures. This is a nice picture that I found. There's my dad, me, and my mother, and that's my dad's mother. So that's my grandmother. There's me and my sister. There's me and my first Schwinn bike. Interesting thing about this shadow, I'm not sure who took the picture, but I know one thing. I've got a picture of me with a shadow similar to that. So it's just interesting because it's interesting to me. My brother was born in 52, so he came around 9 years later than me. This is a picture of all of us, and I think that's over in Nevada, but I'm not sure. There's a picture of me, my brother, and my sister. There's a picture of the 3 of us in El Segundo at our house there. I'm sure that was Halloween. That's my 16th birthday party. So I'm just trying to show you some ideas. This is high school graduation. I actually went to her senior night. I went to her grad night and not my own, but that was fun. I was in the Air Force in the 60s. I was an air policeman. John F. Kennedy. They put in historical markers. Now we're getting to my first wife. This is my sister. That's a friend of mine, Audrey, and her friend. Just a trip we took up into the mountains. I had access to cabins up there. Got the Cuban Missile Crisis. So it documents you in history and your history and then history that was around it. So I'm not going to go through too much more of this, but I just wanted to show you if you have pictures. This is my cousin. Her daughter actually created this tree, and so I have that. This is the family. These are all cousins. I mentioned Mark and Danny. That's their mother, Jackie. That's her sister, Carolyn. She has dementia. She's in a place out in east side of LA. Her son lives out there, and that's where she's close to him. This is my Aunt Lillian. Her husband was the one that did the initial family tree. This is my cousin, Marilyn. That's my mother's first cousin. I just talked to her. She had her 90th birthday a couple of weeks ago. So her daughter set up a Zoom meeting. So that was fun. That's my sister Sherry. She passed away when she was 33. That's the mother of my children. This is Suzanne. She and I still talk, fortunately. And so this is a trip that I took with my grandmother, friend of my grandmother's, my soon-to-be wife, and my sister. And we went up to Yellowstone and drove all over the Tetons and stuff like that. Grand Canyon, that was on our honeymoon. That's Juarez. That was when we got married, the car. So once again, I have a lot of pictures because they mean something to me, so I put them on there. This is my son when he was born. We used to take him in the pool, teach him how to swim. There he is. I got him up on my hands and on his feet. So once again, it's just a lot of fun. This is my son when he got older. I took him up to Mammoth, and we got a little lucky. There was a group of Japanese photographers who were filming snow equipment up in Mammoth. They asked him if he wanted to be a model. So my son and these two people are models for the snowsuits and the skis. So was probably in some Japanese magazine advertisements, but the nice thing about it, he got to keep the skis and he got to keep the clothes. He later on went into snowboarding, so sort of got off the skis into snowboarding. I've never been skiing, not of interest to me. That's my daughter. I took her group of brownies to Marineland for an outing. That's my daughter and her best friend, who they still are friends today and talk. And my daughter I gave ice skating lessons to, so I used to take her ice skating every week. And that's me and my kids. I took them on a trip. We went up north into Mammoth and Reno and San Francisco. So once again, this is the timeline that you can have on Ancestry. It's based on the records. It's based on what you put in there and that type of thing. So if you want to know more, I can tell you more about it. I can show you how to work with Ancestry. I can show you how to get started. I have a lot of fun with it because I enjoy it. And primarily, I hope that someday my granddaughters will have access to it and have some interest in it.
Okay, John, this is Lori.
Yeah, Lori.
Hi, John. Okay, are you done with your presentation?
No, I've got two more short things to go through.
Oh, okay, got it. Because I'm sure people have questions, so I just want
Yeah,
to make sure you
I'm gonna leave that up, but let me go through.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so let me get this up full screen. Okay. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because genealogy can be scary. It's a lot of work, takes a lot of time. You have to really want to do it and you have to be interested in, which my best subjects in school were history and stuff like that. So I have an innate interest in all of this stuff. But what does it take to really get started? Okay. First of all, if you sit down and you think about it and you create your family trees, that's really the first step. And it's no more difficult than sitting down with a piece of paper and writing down the information that you know. The other thing is, for most of us, I think it's important that we try to get other people involved. Because if you do it while you still have family members to ask, number one, you can get information. Number two, you can create a family history and get into the family tree but as a novice and trying to locate and search all this stuff, it helps to have other people to work with you. It's basically a matter of getting started with the basics, then going on and trying to get other things, other people involved. You can get your children involved. You can get aunts and uncles involved. Anybody that can help you out, particularly when it comes to working the electronics, okay? And I some cousins that are on, Ancestry.com. There are people who don't want to do it, so there's not much you can do in that area. But if you can get help, you get other people interested, if you can give them the basic information to help get started, that I think is really important. And if you're new to genealogy, these are the first steps, okay? And there's also a lot of information on genealogy out in the world, on the internet. I want to go through one thing that I find interesting that I've got on my Facebook site, and I think that if I can get it up here. Okay. Okay, so this is Facebook, and okay, so these are all the groups that I have on Facebook. Okay, what I wanted to show you didn't come up. All right. Well, okay, I wanted to show you groups, and I thought I could do it easily. Cursor work. Okay. And just as a side note, I have a residence group for Fountain View. If anybody's interested, I'll talk to you more about that. Here we go, Tracing the Tribe, Jewish Genealogy on Facebook. Okay, Jewish wisdom, okay. Polish ancestry roots. Jewish genealogy portal. Polish genealogy. Ukrainian genealogy. I just wanted to point this out. If you're on Facebook and you want to go take a look at some of that, you can get some interesting information. You can learn a little bit about it. And there are groups that can help people who want to research, particularly if you want to go back into Europe. Once again, it's not been of interest to me that much, but I will tell you this. If you go back into Europe, there's a couple of things. One, you have to be able to understand the language or know somebody that will understand the language, because there's always a language. Documents are going to be in the language of the country. And so most of that has to be translated unless you happen to speak that language. My grandparents and my family, the last people I know that were multilinguistic. My grandfather could speak Polish, Russian, Ukrainian, languages. That stopped with him because my parents.
Uh-oh, somehow we lost John. Okay. Not sure where John went. Hopefully he'll come back on. but I think it's a huge labor of love, and it's time that we ask Dawn questions. Let me go ahead and, okay. Does anyone have, Harry, I'm recording this, so John will hear your question. Do you have any questions or thoughts?
Yes, I did a little genealogy myself for I had a sister who was born in Russia but died when she was a year and a half old in the United States after they arrived in 1923. And I always wanted to know where she was buried and all that kind of stuff because my parents didn't know. She died within a few months of arriving in America, and I was born after that. So it was always of interest to me. Rivka was her name, and so I got into Jewish genealogy a little bit, or not Jewish, just to my genealogy, and I went down to joined the Los Angeles Jewish Genealogy Society, and they helped a lot. Going to some of their meetings.
Hello? I'm sorry,
That's okay,
somehow I
John.
lost it.
That's okay, John. Harry's sharing. Harry's sharing. Go ahead, Harry.
Yeah, so anyhow, I was able to go down to the Mormon library and find all the records. And what was interesting to me is I found a photograph of the ship that my parents came here on from Liverpool and landed in Boston. And it was really a wonderful thing. The Jewish Genealogy Society was very helpful, and I went to a lot of their meetings to learn more and more. I never went into Ancestry. They advertise it, John, they advertise the Ancestry. What do? Just call up and say you want some information?
Yeah, I'm familiar with them. I've seen some of their meetings.
Yeah, but he's asked, so no, John went to the website. John, Harry was asking how you get Ancestry.com.
Oh, how do you get to it? www.ancestry.com.
It's a website. So you
It's a
have
website.
and now, John, did you pay? There was an
Yeah, you pay annually for that.
okay. Okay.
But the nice thing about it is you can share that information. Again, I mentioned my daughter has, she's on Ancestry, taken the chart that I have with all the information and put it on her site, so she has it. And so you can share information back and forth, as much or as little as you want.
Well, I was lucky. For a long time, I couldn't find where my sister was buried. And so I finally gave up. I did a lot of looking at archives from New York and New Jersey. I even hired somebody in London because a cousin of mine who was born and knew my sister, Rivka, thought that she had died on board ship. So I hired a guy in London to look up the Cunard lines, and there was no record of her having died on it, but there are records of her in the United States. Finally, and so I was able to. My son had a patient and who was in genealogy a lot, and she gave me some help, and I was able to get the birth certificate of my sister, and the birth certificate showed that my mother's name was Chava. Yacha, they used to talk to him, but on the birth certificate, It said the name of the mother was Yetta. It was the name of my wife.
Oh my God.
And it's really a lot of fun.
That's a fun thing about this. You learn different things about different people, and you'll see different names. Like I told you, my mother's name was Elavina. I would have never known that if I hadn't seen her birth certificate. It's just a lot of fun to get into this and then to see some of the information that you come up with. And the more people you talk to, the more opportunity you have to learn. Like you mentioned, you had somebody that helped you. So there's a lot of help out there. You just have to get into it. Anybody have any specific questions?
Anyone have a question for John? Just unmute yourself. John, how long did this take you to put together? I mean, this seems like such a project.
Well, I've been working on this since the 90s when I got the initial information. And with me, it's just been a gradual process of development. You know, I've done it in my spare time or when I think about it. And the nice thing about today with Ancestry, a lot of it comes to me. I don't even have to go search for it. Although you can search for all this information, it's available. Electronics is amazing. I think the whole world from an electronic standpoint, if you have to get back into Europe and those places, they're going to get all of that stuff on electronics. It'll all be digitized. And so that research will be easier. But once again, the only thing I get concerned about is the language issue.
Right.
Hi.
Hi, Bobby.
Hi. I just wanted to mention that excuse me, on one of our cruises, we stopped at Vancouver, and they told us at the end of the port where we docked, there was an immigration museum. So we went down there, and Vancouver is to Canada what Ellis Island is to the US. So this was a very interesting museum. They had lots of posters and about all the wave of immigration in the 20s and 30s. And they directed us to a room down because I told them that my mother had come from Canada. So they thought I might have interest in this room downstairs. Went in, there were about 3 or 4 guys sitting at computers. When I think back now, I think they were Mormons. They had the Mormon uniform, you know, the dark pants, the white shirt, the black tie. And I remembered my grandfather's name, a very long, unpronounceable Polish name, but they recognized it. And I remembered the address that my grandparents lived at. And within minutes, they had pulled up the census report from 1910, which listed my grandparents and my mother and all her siblings and their age. It was, they were just all there. As I remember all these aunts and uncles.
Did you know that they've been converted to Mormonism? I'm
I'm
serious. I'm serious.
That's true, Harry. That's true.
The Mormons have all these records and some
Yes.
in here with the intent of retroactively
Right.
converting them to Mormonism.
And you know something, Harry? We ought to be thankful they did it because it makes life easy.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, but I don't like to wear a black tie and
Well, I agree with you on that portion of it, but
That's their uniform.
I can wear
they can do whatever they want. I don't care.
tzitzis underneath if I want. But there was a thing, and I forgot. A lot of people have resented the fact that
Yeah.
whoever they find a record of, they convert to Mormonism.
My ex-boss was a very active Mormon, and we used to have some very interesting, he constantly tried to convert me. He said, and if you're a Mormon and if you convert a Jew to a Mormon, you get extra points.
That's right. That's right.
That's the biggest thing you can do is to convert a Jew.
Yeah. Let me talk, can I talk about records for a minute? Because I think that's interesting. My grandfather owned 2 stores in Los Angeles, one on Fountain Avenue and one on West Adams. And I was able to find, number one, both of those store addresses. And I was able to find out, they also lived on Alsace and near West Adams. And I was able to get that address, all from phone records and census records. And also, when you look at my grandfather, my dad, it's my dad's father, he's on the New York census for I think it's 1930, because in the Depression, he kept giving away food in the store, and eventually he picked up the family and moved to New York, and they all went to work for an uncle back there who had a large wholesale produce business. And so they actually ended up on the census back there, and I have an aunt that was born back there, so I've got her birth certificate. So a lot of those records are fun because you can track your family and see where they've lived, places like that.
Okay, well, I want to remind everyone that John is available to help you if you want to dive into this yourself and explore. And John has years of experience, and what a great thing actually to do during this pandemic while we're more confined to our apartments. This is a wonderful project, right, John?
Yeah, I think so. And if they want some help, I'd be glad to help them. And you know,
Keep thinking you're going to fall into the San Francisco Bay.
Okay.
if on Zoom, I have my own Zoom, so they have different backgrounds that you can put up. It's better to see that background than what's in my apartment.
Oh my God.
Oh.
All right. Okay, well, thank you, John, for sharing all of
You're
your
welcome.
years of hard work with us. It's very inspiring. Do you have any, let me ask you just quickly, do you have any fear about putting your DNA out there, doing a DNA? Is there any reason we should be concerned?
No, because I really don't care. I have, you know, I'm not the type of person that runs around with fear in their back. It's, you know, I've got cousins that they won't do with this because they're so afraid that they're afraid of their own shadow. And I just don't have that kind of fear. I mean, what's somebody going to do with it? I mean, the information that people need to do anything isn't on Ancestry. Okay. So, you know, it doesn't bother me.
Okay, good, good. Well, I'm curious to see if any of you take on this challenge. And again, reach out to John for any questions or guidance. All right, everybody. So we have Shabbat.
Thank you, Lori.
We have Shabbat in 30 minutes. So I hope to see you all in 30 minutes to welcome Shabbat together.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, John.